I don't know about you guys, but I do not have good weapon enchants right now.
I have a quality 1 Burning Writ. Because I am... Okay. I am perpetually poor in World of Warcraft. I'm not buying any tokens. That's not okay. And also, I don't know how to make gold. I don't have the time to make gold. So this whole, like... I will say, I am always in the... how to describe this? I'm always in the camp of... I'm trying to think of that like Bugs Bunny meme of just I wish every rich person in World of Warcraft have a nice you lose all the prices, tank them to pieces. I want someone to put Sophic Devotion up there for like 1k and it to stick.
Yes, you
somehow.
Are humongously exposed to motivation as a World of Warcraft participant in the economy.
I would very much eat the rich in World of Warcraft. Very much how I feel about things, because those are like, it's just too much. It's too close to accidentally pay to win.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating to say that because it's like they clearly don't mean it that way. And it's clearly a part of like having an economy in a game. But it very much does feel that way of just, yeah, this is kind of pay to win. For me, I would have to go and do a completely different thing in game, which obviously at the point I don't have to buy the WoW token, but it's there. And it's more efficient than fighting in a market, which I can't fight in a market because the way the professions are designed, you can't actually catch up or get ahead of the curve
I think
at all.
The best you can do is like maybe quickly build your way towards a like a daily limited craft build. But even at that, I mean, other people are just gonna have so much of a higher proc rate.
Yeah,
good quality. Yeah, there are challenges to professions. We might get into that later. But what they have done here, though, is they have quite significantly buffed the drop rate of the glowing Titan orbs. And what's cool is with Orbos Exchange, which Orbos Exchange is great. It's just like the auction house UI in the web, essentially. It's really fantastic. So we can have a look here at the 14-day hourly price data, and you can see it absolutely tanks. Now, this is, one of the underlying assets. Obviously, the decrease is larger here than it is, from the overall enchant, but we are seeing pretty damn significant decrease in price, which is really needed.
Sorely.
Because this previously was like 75 to 100,000 gold. Now it's going for about 35,000 gold, which is still quite a lot.
That is still over 10% of my net worth.
That's it. That's
in-game net worth, not
your net worth is £2.
Yep, more or less. Like that's exactly what it feels like, because that's what DK Tip just said. When you consider hourly wage versus time it would take to grind the gold yourself in game, real world money is better. You just work an hour more at your job, dangerous thing. And that's always the thing of that's how they get you. That's how I'm not going to go into this any deeper. I'll stop here. But that's how the whole ecosystem is designed to, what's more valuable, your time or your money? Your time, so give us money instead. That's unfortunately a side effect of the WoW token. I wouldn't have this complaint if the game was just economically that way and there was no WoW token. It'd be fine otherwise.
Yeah.
Which is a problem. And then obviously that's what Gungriff says. I warned the professions are just designed as WoW token sync, but you're praising them to high heavens pre-release. There's a lot to praise about them gameplay-wise. The problem fundamentally was when rubber hit the road and the tuning of them and how players reacted to them and how work orders ultimately fell through, especially because they weren't not fell through quite manifested, I would say, because there's a couple of the elements allowed for monopolies to occur because of you could fix a lot of this with knowledge catch-ups and knowledge respecs, like weekly or something would solve some of these problems. But it's I think a lot of this, I wouldn't say I think a lot of praise was with an asterisk of we'll have to see how this goes, because they're designed fairly well. I don't think they were designed as WoW token sinks, because otherwise they wouldn't do this and increase the drop rate. They would go, look at the amount of money we've got. Yeah, let's go. We're raking in WoW tokens from people buying enchants. I just think it's of all of the things they've done very well, I think this is something that they've only done 50 to 60% well. Yeah. And they could probably bring it up to 80 in a 0.05 or fix most of it in a 0.1 if they have the resources and the will to do so.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but like the crafting order system is basically unpopulated. Like for the public orders, I think people just do private ones because of the guaranteed quality.
Yeah, that's it.
I suppose that's it. As long as the public ones don't have guaranteed quality, people aren't really going to use them.
Yeah.
At least for many things. I don't know. Like, let me know in your server. What have you seen with crafting orders? I haven't really seen any. I mean, there are basic, epic crafts that I can do as a tailor. At no point have I ever seen a work order for those.
Yeah, there's almost like too little importance placed on them.
Yeah, and then I click around the UI even to things that I can't craft, and I don't see work orders.
Yeah.
Where are they?
People are doing them for... Well, I guess it'd be different if you could work order nonsense things or small things or reusable things a lot, but then that would defeat with them being like things you make to sell, because work orders are only for BOP stuff.
Yeah.
So there is like maybe there's a world where they have BOE stuff, or not just BOE stuff, but like, items and stuff on the work order for something different.
Well, look at that.
But it does need a bit of a fix.
Jay Burza, dead on Draenor. I'm assuming that's Draenor EU, which is the largest Horde server. Yes. I think Ravencrest is the largest alliance, right? Or one of the larger ones.
It might be, yeah. It's very close.
Yeah, so like we're on a pretty chunk. Well, yeah, per the UI, our server's full. Mm-hmm. I think the same goes for Draenor as well. Yeah, we're basically not seeing work orders being participated in, which is a real shame.
Sure.
If they could have had that working, it really would have... Well, I suppose that's it. They had this whole intended fantasy, and we all looked at the work orders and thought, oh yeah, cool, this all seems great. And people don't use the work orders.
Yeah.
So, I have to imagine that they very quickly realized that nobody's using work orders, and I imagine they're going to do something about it. Because I think that work orders are I think they're very pivotal to the overall scheme here. I think Blizzard's idea with the work orders, and it's probably why people have got to, for the public ones, supply all of the mats. The idea is, and maybe this is what's causing some of our problems with accessibility and catch-up on the profession system. Blizzard probably assumed that most people would be able to go and, they put a cap on how many work orders you could do in a week. So they clearly thought, oh yeah, well, that's how people are going to level. They said in interviews that's part of the idea of how people will level, but now we're seeing that people are not choosing to level like that. So then it ends up being a lot harder for a crafter. I could just use my sparks of ingenuity to get some knowledge, I guess, and, craft some gear for myself and maybe slowly upgrade it over time. But no, big picture, it's very slow.
I think it's just because I guess, technically, and I think a lot of this comes down to the depth in the system. And this is frustrating because I think obviously if you don't have this, if you don't have depth in the system, you don't have a system, you don't have anything that's fun to play, because you go back to the old one where there was zero depth whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But I think the depth has resulted in, especially when it comes to weekly caps and the potential to min-max. And this isn't a story and a half about MMOs in general, but there's such capacity for min-maxing and not enough stringent limits on what people can do, especially for people who are crafters, but they're not crafters who, I'm going to play the game for 3 hours after work, which is already a lot for an average player. And then doing my crafting, that's what I'm going to do most of my time. There's people who are online 16 to 20 hours a day, and they are crafting, and they are available to craft. And it is just the whole thing ends up being the rich get richer substantially, and even a small mistake can put you marginally behind. But it's, as someone suggested, it's the idea of there's just full monopolies. Full, you go to this crafter for this because they're the one in the server who can do this because they're the best. Why would you go to anyone else unless they're not available? There's no limit on them doing personal orders, for example. So there's no way to break into the market. And that's long been a problem I've had with the game in general, because it's so it's such a free market generally. That's if you have more gold than someone else, you can buy them out and shut them out of the market. And that's how people do things. I feel like there needs to be some sort of competition method introduced into how they make the system, and I have no idea how to do that. I think one of the problems is that people are inflexible because of knowledge being fixed. And I love the fantasy as a crafter of, fixed. You're going to specialize in this. You're going to put all your points in being Japanese watchmaker. That's going to be you, and you're going to make the best damn watches ever. It's going to be such a good experience. But I think that doesn't vibe with the economy. Just like in real life, believe it or not. Because then some factory comes along and makes watches better. Ah, fuck. But I think that's where I think they need to free up knowledge a little bit. Maybe throw a few more wrenches into the machinery just so people can't min-max it to death. And I wouldn't, because you don't want to start throwing arbitrary limits on, because then in the real world there you get capital flight. In the game world you just get like frustrated players who don't get to do what they want to do. But I feel like that's where if you let the biggest fish in the pond roam freely, eating the other fish, you don't have any fish left. And that's just one of the things they maybe weren't fully considering when they got this through, because they were so focused on the fantasy that the reality kind of escaped them.
I think a part of it though is nobody knows to use a work order, because anytime they go to the system, it's not engaged in that much. Yeah. So it's as if, like, it's not people's reflex to think, oh, I'll just do a public work order.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like a little bit of a chicken and an egg, where people are just not trained to use it because right now it's not particularly useful. You know, imagine a world where crafters were actually looking at that regularly. It's like right now, I think most crafters just don't bother looking at it.
Yeah,
it's like you just know, there's not really a point. So because like you don't really like, you're not going to bother. You know, people who want crafts aren't going to bother. Also, if you don't have that crafting profession, maybe it's tricky for you to work out, like, what do I even get crafted?
Oh, that's the thing where, like,
just it's that side too, because not everybody will lean on Wowhead.
Yeah, especially when it's like, oh, what gear you want? Oh, your lariat? Done. Sorted. And that's like, well, that's the one that's the strongest. What do you with everything else? I don't know. I can't figure this out. Or because it's too permanent, the item you make, it's very easy to do it wrong. And this is where I think it's almost like they didn't want to make the crafted gear necessary. They did with the lariat accidentally, not literally, but more or less. If you want the best neck, you can go get it, and it's way stronger than any other neck. So I think they were afraid to make the crafted gear required, and rightfully so, because legendary gear was required, and that was a massive problem for the game. So having to go and like economically dump that again was because the price was a problem for legendary gear in Shadowlands a lot of the time. I think they need to just the vault and how gear can drop so randomly kind of throws off your decision making. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. Because I'm not going to go.
You're always thinking about that dance with the vault,
especially when it comes to gear that overlaps with tier slots. I'm not going to go get hands, because what if I get hands from the next 10 plus I do, or if I get hands from the vault or from the weekly dungeon quest for whenever that shows up, and it feels like I'm spending a lot of money for something I could replace for nothing, and it's not a lot of money. Like, I could get it back in a couple of days. It's a lot of money. I would be doing my dragon riding world quests for like 6 weeks to get this back, if not longer. And that's kind of the awkward part of the economy. Just needs a lot more work. And I think it's like maybe, I don't know who they have internally who's handling that, because I don't see anyone who's like an economist on their credits, because they scan through those. So I think they need to actually hire like a team of economists and go, right, we need to get this sorted out because they can solve a lot of the experiential problems pretty quick. But long term, I think they need to make this a big approach going into 11.0, which is still a long way away. But I guess they're talking about it now. But there's probably a lot of small things you could do to sort it, probably. But they're in a kind of tough place, because every time it's the same with Capital Flight in real life. Anytime they de-incentivize a big monopolistic trader, they are liable to lose their like some of their most valued customers. Obviously, that's in the favor of more customers who aren't that way. But then you're playing customers off against each other, and that's a problem. Yeah. But that's what happens when you have a PvP game, and the economy is PvP always.
Oh man, yeah, it's a shame. I'd like that stuff to work. Like, anytime I'm just tooling around with profession and not really thinking about it from a min-maxing or a money-making way, it's like, okay, cool, fun enough. I can see how I could progress this. But it's the moment you try to like slot that into the game. Now, one thing they have done is, they've increased the drop rates for the quest items, which is good, because some of those were a little bit annoying. Yeah, it does feel like, though, some way of accelerated profession knowledge growth may be required. I think Blizzard thought that there would be a vibrant enough work order economy at multiple different levels of, like, crafting quality that people would be able to level up their characters, in part by leaning on the work order system to get crafts that would yield them skill.
Without the economic burden of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's why the person has got to submit their own mats for a public order. Yeah. But because that hasn't happened, basically a segment of Blizzard's overarching design is no longer there, which means that now we are talking about profession knowledge. Because the profession knowledge that we all get now is only part of the weekly profession knowledge that you're supposed to get. Blizzard also had 20 public crafting orders. Like, they throttled that. Like, they probably throttled that to, I guess, pace out people's progression.
I think it's more so one
and
person.
Also
one person can't do them all, basically. Yeah. But they needed cap it to like 5.
Well, their big idea anyway is that people could progress without the economic cost via work orders, so people aren't doing those. And then the only way to get the profession knowledge is by, I guess, slowly doing better crafts yourself, or just finding, the items around the world and, all of that.
Yeah, and that's where there's a whole...
It just doesn't work. It's not actually the pacing that they intended, because they did intend people to use work orders and they're not.
And there's a whole ton of different problems there when it comes to the design of like how things play off against each other. Just because of how historically World of Warcraft has always been, the mats are more valuable than the finished product, because crafting has no skill, no investment. Obviously some investment for skill, especially like back in the early days of like WoW and like vanilla, that was more important. Now and for the last like 5 expansions, that's not been the case. So this time they wanted to put basically some effort in, but you kind of can't do that too hard without the min-max problem showing up. So it is like almost like a scale of like, you want mats to be less important versus skill. Okay, well then you need a lot more investment in the skill. And then that's gone a wee bit wrong, because then you level up through mats. So it's kind of when the mats are extremely expensive. But then there's also the skill required in getting good mats. So it's just like, it's really throttled and just jumped the price of everything versus effort. Yeah. And that's not really reflected correctly. So they need to magically, and I'm saying magically because this is going to be hard, they need to find a way to get a lot more skill and effort into the crafting side of things to make the ability to craft a lot more important and a lot more, I guess, valued in the market. But they have to do that without blocking newer players, not newer players and newer players, but like people who just enter the market late, or someone who rolls a new character, as an example, to get there, or someone with 2 hours a day to play instead of 16. You have to make the market possible to play in for them. And that just sounds like effectively impossible without some really crazy out of the box thinking or threading an absolute needle with some genius move. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but it feels like that's why it's so hard. So these things to play off.
How you compete, it's like, that time when in the Two Towers where Grime is all like, fuck bro, what are we gonna do? And Saruman's like, yo dog, fiery explosion rock, also a big shed full of lads.
Yeah.
And then your man's like, oh no, tear. It's a bit like that with TSM.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, instead of being against such reckless hate, it is against so much power. Luke in our guild, I don't know if he uses TSM.
Definitely does.
Now,
he makes money from flipping.
I should say, like, as a project and all of that, TSM is fucking awesome.
It's wonderful.
A lot of people also do...
That's why it should be banned and illegal.
Sometimes people do get... you know what, Windows? Let's not perform an update right now.
That would be...
because with TSM, people like think it's automation. It's not, technically.
It's not... It itself is not automation. There are definitely people who automate with it through additional layers.
It is offloaded logic.
Yeah.
You still have to press the do the thing button, even if that is by just getting your mouse wheel and going flick.
Yeah.
So yeah, funny wee situation. But anyway, against the power of TSM, it's hard to know what to do, because like just being able to do a cancel scan
Like,
and being able to do like a buy scan and just all of that logic, and because like TSM is very hard to get into for a lot of people, but actually once you have TSM set up, it's like easy mode because you have a trading strategy. I mean, I don't know if it's almost like fucking weird quant trading things where,
Definitely
you know, you develop
like
your strategy and then you can backtest your strategy. Obviously, you can't backtest with TSM, but, you know, you just tell TSM, I want these things at this formula that works out pricing. Yeah. So it's like, even against all of that, it is pretty hard for the average person, even if they have something like Auctionator, to compete. And then, like, the other side to this then is a new character is going to be so many profession knowledge behind an established character. And then it's a weird thing, because if you make the catch-up be really quick and easy,
then it's pointless.
Then, yeah, it kind of devalue. Yeah. It's like the idea, oh no, this person's ahead. Well, yeah, it's because that's what they really focused on. In the same way somebody really focused on doing loads of M+ is way ahead of me in gearing. I'm 390 at the minute. Or am I 391? I think I'm 390. You know, there's people that are maybe 398. Now, I don't begrudge them because they've either been lucky or they've just put way more work in than me. But it's weird that it feels like a little bit different with professions. I feel like
it does because it's a PvP system.
Yeah.
It's because it's directly PvP. You're competing for the same resource. You're competing for the same sales. So it's like, if you are not as good because, you know, or if someone catches up with less effort, then your effort's devalued because you're in the same ecosystem. Whereas if you're if you're pushing 15s or pushing 20s, then that person doesn't matter to you if you're pushing 10s. They are like outside of that ecosystem, unless they're doing 10s and not letting you in. But I
suppose a mild form of catch-up or accelerated progression would be okay. It just has to be mild, because the person who's got the power early is going to make all of the money early. So they're still going to be ahead no matter what. I mean, you could even just titrate the amount of quests, you know, of profession knowledge earning quests that appear for a character every week, based on a character's total sum knowledge, and the difference between, like, you know, the servers, or, you know, the sort of logic of what if somebody did just do all of their stuff every week. I suppose you could just do something like that.
It's very Diablo 4 you.
I know it is. It is very D4 like, but maybe something like that could be the thing to do. Anyway, not to go into professions forever. Though we should say, the Dark Moon Fair will get you 2 profession skill points, 3 profession knowledge, and 15 artisan's metal.
For another day.
Yeah. Log into it now. Do the thing. Get some knowledge.
Yeah. The other one thing I just want to highlight, because it's in chat there, it's very funny. Actually, I'll scroll up and get it again. Yes, it was Fairlane goes using TSM right now. Love it. I'd hate posting my 1,600 items every day manually.
Oh boy, yeah.
And then Elizabeth comes straight after and says THM. Or THM? What's THM? TSM is AH botting. You go, yeah. Both people just said it's botting. Obviously not literally botting if it's, you know, you're posting stuff, but 1,600 items. If posting 1,600 items manually for someone who doesn't use that, or someone who uses Auctionator instead, maybe Auctionator can be automated
it's
in similar
a workflow
ways.
optimization. It's not botting.
Yeah, but if you can post 1,600 items with substantially less effort, then that is an extreme advantage versus someone who's manually putting prices in a lot of the time and trying to manually keep up instead of getting all that automated. So
yeah, well, what Sephiroth says, it's not botting, but it's pretty much as close to it as you could get.
Yeah, it is bending the rules more or less in what I would consider like if I were Blizzard and I went, in good faith, should this be allowed versus the experience of the normal average player, I would heavily lean towards no, just because it is like, it's the equivalent of a giga weak aura. Even weak auras aren't anywhere near as strong. It's like a weak aura pointing direction to go, and it's like a weak aura saying, hit space and I'll move you to the right place if set up correctly.
See, a lot of people are saying that it's like, you know, Mickey there. Like, so for how TSM works, you basically set up a group and then you set up rules that kind of like dictate that group. So all you're really doing is you're telling it what logic you would follow. And instead of you having to do all those calculations, the add-on does the calculations. Now, Blizzard's definition of botting is 1 mouse or keyboard action per in-game event. Now, that means that botting. If you turned on like a turbo button for one of your keys using your keyboard software like Razer Synapse, and let's just say, you held the 1 button and that was the interact button that you were using for TSM, that would be botting.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get a Logitech like Infinity Scroll mouse wheel and flick it, and it just goes really quick, and then it just does 1600 in one flick, not botting, because technically that sensor has had an actual actuation per in-game event. So that's like the funny minutia of how botting is technically defined.
It would be the equivalent of using something like GNOME Sequencer to just press one button repeatedly, and that one button always does the next button that's the best for your rotation at that point in time. It's the equivalent of that for the auction house, although you do have to set it up yourself, whereas a lot of those will be like copy paste a best thing. You do have to set it up yourself, and there is because it's directly competing, you can't all make money off the same thing. It is a PvP market where you do have to profit off other people making mistakes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So it's not botting, but it's extremely close to automating the hard part. It automates the hard part of the process, which is actually calculating what you should buy and sell.
Yes.
Based on how you've input it. But it's not free money.
It's
just, it gives you a substantial amount of speed and power over other people.
It is a Glock with a large magazine versus a crossbow.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like these are both ranged weapons, but one of them has significantly more usability and performance.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of, I don't know why that makes sense to me, but it does.
Yeah. It's a difficult problem for Blizzard to sort.